I'm Lisa Van Dusen, and welcome to First Person. I'm here with David Kelley, founder of IDEO and the Stanford d.school, and we're here in Woodside at David's home. Welcome, David.
Thanks, Lisa.
Good to be here. And the first question, let's just jump into kind of the big thing that you have championed your whole work life, really, which is design thinking at IDEO and beyond.
Yes.
And just for everybody, if you could define that quickly,
Sure,
and then
sure.
say why you feel so strongly about it.
Sure. So design thinking is kind of a human-centered approach to innovation. It's like, how do you routinely innovate? How do you come up with new ideas, big ideas for the world? And so we believe that by understanding people, by understanding the business issues, and by understanding the kind of technological issues involved and integrating them through this process we call design thinking, that's how you come up with kind of new to the world ideas. And we've been surprised how easy it is for people to adopt. We spent a long time trying to do these kind of multidisciplinary things at the university. And it was hard because people came from their own environments, and it was hard for them to have a common way to do things. And what we found is that because we're so human-centered, because all of our work involves trying to understand what's meaningful to people, that somehow diverse, different kinds of people can get behind that notion. And so the reason I think design thinking has taken off is just because it's so human-centered.
So jumping off from there, what do you think the impact has been already on Silicon Valley, on the world, and kind of what kind of problems do you think has addressed, is teed up to address?
Sure. So this is a way of kind of understanding people, and so to make sure that you're working on the right problem for them. So often we kind of, we get a project to do, or we're asked to do something inside of a company or an organization, and we're kind of it's kind of decided what direction you're going to go from the very beginning, because almost the way the problem is stated to you almost calls to the answer. And so with our approach, that doesn't exist, because we're going to get what problem is worth doing by talking to the people. So we wade in and kind of immerse ourselves in whatever the situation is. And then there's how we determine the problem. So we pivot whatever we were working on to begin with to the place that's really meaningful. So I think the impact, to your question, I think the impact has been on solving the human problem. So let me give you an example. So we're looking at fire prevention in Nairobi, and that's a difficult problem. They have these kind of places that are easily catch fire. The kind of wiring and everything isn't that great, and so we go to look at that. And when we get there and we really understand the people, yes, they're afraid of fire, but what they're really worried about is losing their documents, their papers. Because, we can go to the DMV and get a new license, although it's a pain, but, they're not allowed to be in the house or maybe even in the country if they lose their papers. And so they're really fearful of that. So once you feel the empathy for them, and that's their real problem, then the real innovation comes. Instead of doing little fire prevention things, we get a pickup truck with scanners in it and go around and scan all their documents and put them up in the cloud. Now they're secure when we have everybody's documents already, officially logged, right? And so you can see that we went there thinking that the innovation would be in fire prevention, and it turned out it was in document scanning. So that's the kind of thing that's kind of the impact that I really think that our design thinking kind of approach does, is it's really trying to get down to the real problem, right? What's the real meaningful problem? And so whether it's that or a Planned Parenthood or Ford or, we're all over the map, I think that's the same place, is focusing on the human-centered side of things. There's also the business side, and there's the technical side too, which we're also interested in, but those are more easily served. So I think the design thinking took off because it was kind of underserved area. Technology and business were well served, but the kind of human factor stuff was not as well served in innovation. And so I think we've added that to the mix, and I think that's helped a lot. People will ask me, what's your favorite project? We've probably done 4,000 or 5,000 projects. It's like, what's your favorite child? It's hard to answer the question, specifically, but, about, things I care about, because I've trained myself to not care about what I care about. In fact, early on, as a young designer, some big shot at a company asked me, what did I think? And I said, well, I like this one. And the person completely unloaded on me saying,
Like, wrong answer.
who cares what you like? I'm trying to sell 50,000 of them, so your personal preference is of no consequence. So I never said that again, what I liked in any meeting.
Yeah.
But so it's not important what I like. It's for me is I try to keep an open mind and see, okay, what is it that somebody, what's going to be the solution that's really going to delight the people or make a difference in these people's lives? So I expect to get the excitement and the motivation from the people.
You're also teaching design thinking.
Yes.
You're teaching it both in a university setting.
Yes.
You're a professor at Stanford, teaching at the D.school, and also really teaching in a lot of company settings, either directly or indirectly.
Sure.
So you're also teaching a class coming up at IDEO.
Yes.
And what's motivating you in that context? Like you're putting time and energy into that. Why is that important to you?
Well, I think that in all those venues where we're teaching design thinking, I think it's all the same desire, and for me, the same motivation for me, and that is that I want to help as many people as possible gain their creative confidence. I just saw, my whole life I've been the creative one, and other people have said, oh, I'm not creative like you, or I'm not the creative, I'm the analytical one, or something. And it's just bull. I mean, everybody, in my opinion, is wildly creative. Just look at a kindergarten class. I mean, they're all wildly creative, and somehow it's trained out of them. They opt out of thinking of themselves as creative. And this really bothers me, especially by the time they get to Stanford, and it's so ingrained that they're not a creative person. And so that's just a funny fear, a fear of being judged by their peers. And it's the same as executives. I said, we're going to do this thing, and I say, we're going to start this, like we're going to start with improv or something. Everybody grabs their phone and says, I got an important call, I got to leave. They're just afraid, that fear of of being, like judged poorly by your peers or whatever, or failing or whatever it is.
Or looking silly.
Yeah, and so we know that, play is an important part of everything. So anyway, so I have this singular focus, which is helping as many people as possible feel like that, have the own in their body that they're a creative person. And it's pretty amazing when people flip from thinking of themselves as not creative to people thinking of as creative. They come in my office and it's emotional. Most people cry and say that you can't imagine how it feels to have my whole life not think of myself as a creative person, and now I walk around thinking, that I can, accomplish what I want to do because I'm a creative person. That's pretty, as an educator, that's pretty strong stuff. So it's hard to ignore that feeling.
So are there things that you find that hinder or help, like as prior experience, that can accelerate regaining or building that creative confidence?
Well, we know that the only real way to actually make it happen is what we call, or psychologists at Stanford calls guided mastery. So we know the only real way it happens is if you're encouraged by having some small successes. So we can, I wouldn't say artificially, but we can set up so that you have a good chance of flipping over to the feeling by having you have a bunch of small successes. So in general, what's happened is think about it. You're a kid and your mother or your piano teacher says, hey, you're really good at this piano stuff. You're gonna continue taking piano lessons, right? And if you're the kid and the kind of thing says, you're pretty lame at this piano.
Well, think about a different direction.
Yeah, how about the saxophone? Then you opt out of it, right? It's saying just like drawing is that way. People who aren't inherently good at drawing are said you're not artistic or you're not creative, and that's silly because you can't draw because you haven't practiced or you haven't learned anything, right? So anyway, I think that the trick we know for sure is to have people have lots of small successes, and then that fear of being judged becomes familiar. It's like I said with the executives. If we get them to do improv for a while, a couple of times, they like it and they want to do it, right? And that's just flipped them from having the fear of it to it being a normal thing they've done before, and so it feels good. So that, both in a small way and a big way, the trick is to have somebody experience success at being creative multiple times, and then they own it. Then it's there in their body.
So really that positive reinforcement, that the micro successes.
Yeah, I say it's more than positive reinforcement. It's multiple micro ones rather than one big slug.
Right, because then you think, oh, that was a fluke.
Yeah, or you can talk yourself out of it. But if one time, it's exactly what you said, something happens, it's a fluke. But if you've had like 5 or 6 or 7 successes in a row,
you start to believe
what's the probability that those were all flukes, not high?
Right,
Yeah.
and it sounds like that really works, really regardless of age.
Regardless of age and regardless of subject.
Yeah.
Snakes, creative confidence, heights, spiders.
Right.
Fear.
Exactly.
It's about fear.
Silicon Valley's attitude towards design and creativity. How have you seen that evolve over the last 30 plus years?
I don't think I've seen Silicon Valley change a lot. There's been a lot of change. But with respect to my subject, with respect to the stuff I care about, design thinking, and creativity, I don't think that Silicon Valley's changed any different from the Midwest or Europe or Asia or whatever. I mean, the conventional view of design was about the aesthetic, was about people who were in design. If I said I was a designer, they'd say, well, what do you think of my skirt? Or what do you think of my drapes? Or, like that. And I wasn't that kind of designer at all, right? But the conventional thing was the aesthetics, almost like we suffered in those days from, like, we were called in at the end and or asked to make it pretty. So all of the technical stuff was done, all of the business decisions had been made, and then it was, put the lipstick on it, is the kind of, that was what design was. Now, having said that, design was pretty important even in those days, because the look of something really determined whether it had appeal, right? So you have a car that goes so many miles per hour and saves so much gas or does something, and then its look though is probably as important as everything else, or more important than to the purchase decision. So design, it wasn't that it was important, but it was kind of like. It was like we were at the kids' table, not at the adult table. It was not it wasn't a mainstream thing. It was a thing that kind of creative, artistic people did. Never mind about the details, about the business or the technology, just make it pretty. Before, design equaled aesthetics, and now design equals human need.
Right. Yeah, that's the driver.
And that's how interaction design happens. How do you interact with something is basically what kind of human you are. What's easy for a human, right? And that's the whole thing of affordance, like what we call affordance, which is, you walk up to a door and does that door look like you should push on it or pull on it? Or you walk up, you're using a machine to get gas or whatever, any kind of interaction. And early on, in our world, people would say, "Oh, I'm so clumsy. I'm so stupid. I couldn't figure out.
You blame yourself for
how to use it."
Yeah.
Now it's the designer's responsibility. If anybody's saying, "Oh, I'm stupid. I can't use it," it's the designer's fault, not the individual's. And that all comes from having empathy for the people. Now that we're trying to please them rather than ourselves, we better make that interface such that you can walk up to it as a naive user, and the first time buy a ticket on BART or or get the candy bar out of the machine or whatever you got to do.
So we are sitting right now in one of your design collaborations, really, your home, which
with
was
Atrisaxis.
Thank you for pronouncing that. So I didn't need to. And I know you had a very close relationship with him and cared about him a lot and respected his work. And what was it like to collaborate on this house with him?
I've been kind of involved with a lot of great people in my life. As a consultant, that's one of the best parts. You get to meet new people all the time in different companies and different places. And I think this Etri was one of those feelings that I was in the presence of greatness. I haven't felt that so many times, but I really felt it with him. And so being on a train to Venice or eating in his favorite restaurant in Milan were kind of real important experiences to me. It has something to do with Italians too. As a kind of a uptight, nervous California transplanted Midwesterner, I'm not sure that I've figured out how to enjoy every moment, but he had. And so being with him and seeing that kind of love of lunch, love of what's going to happen later today, was a real thing for me. And so when it came, I never felt that I would ever have the chance to build my own house, but through things with my wife and the land and stuff, we ended up on this property that didn't have a house on it. And so I got the chance to build a house, and there was no question that it would be Ettore who would be the architect. And so, yeah, you know, there's a lot of back and forth, but mostly he won the decisions with respect to the house. But it's been a joy living here. Everything is designed to kind of be human and emotional. You know, everything's different. It's not conventional in every way. And so you notice, you know, the windows kind of frame something outside. They look like paintings. And what he said, which is true, is every time you walk by, you rediscover that view. Rather than if it was a big glass wall like a modern house, it would kind of be jaded over time, and you wouldn't look at it.
It's like woodside television.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I grew up in the Midwest, also in Michigan, and grew up around Cranbrook. So was witnessed and experienced the Sarn and Booth collaboration. And,
yeah, no, it's fantastic.
And that very, you know, kind of holistic approach to design.
Yeah,
and
there was a time in design where that was kind of a real kind of contribution to the U.S. We were kind of behind in design, and so people at Cranbrook and places like Saarinen and those kind and Eames and those kind of people really kind of were heroes that American boys and girls could look up to, and that's, for me, that was what it was. There were plenty of European heroes in design, but as the period that you're describing at Cranbrook was a big deal, and
the 20s,
it allows us to, because as growing up as a kid in the Midwest, we really knew who invented what. You know, Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, and Alexander Graham Bell, probably these didn't even invent, they're probably invented somewhere else, but we were told, we were talked to, that Americans that. And so as a kid, we kind of, at least I kind of idolized inventors more than the aesthetic designer types.
I'm just curious about what you think about play, the importance of that, if there were things that how you play now or how you played growing up.
Well,
maybe Ettore was important in helping you a little bit.
Yeah, no, he was good at playing. No, play, you know, broadly defined, you know, I think people think of work and play like that play's the opposite of work or work's the opposite of play. You know, like the opposite of work is inactivity. You know, it's not play. Play is this positive thing, right? And so I really think that that play has the advantage of allowing you it gives you the permission to do things differently, right? If you think about it, if you're playing, you're probably doing things that you haven't done before, or it's okay to do things that you haven't done before. You know, splash in the water, or you know, pile these things up and stuff. Whereas the rest of your life, you have to do what seems to be in the social norm. So, and I look at play as the ability that you have permission to violate the social norms.
So are there any things, I mean, you wrote the book with your brother, you've done a lot of things with your brother, you obviously grew up with your brother. Are there any things that you did with him growing up that you think, oh, good to remember that, come back to that? Or are there things that you like to do now that kind of take you into that mindset? Well,
it's a different time. I mean, 50s in the Midwest is different than 2017 in California, right? So it's really quite different. Our play was totally unsupervised. I mean, you left home early in the morning and you came home for lunch, and then when it got dark, and my dad had this whistle that he whistled, and then we'd come home. In between, nobody had any idea what we were doing.
We had a bell at our house, same thing.
Same thing. So my play was totally unsupervised. The only thing I can say about it is I longed for it. When I started the company that would become IDEO, it was really clear to me that that's what I wanted, is that I didn't want to go into corporate America. I wanted to reproduce the summer with my buddies. You know,
for me, I don't know about for you, but part of it is that feeling of expanse, that you have a blank day in some ways. Like you have choices of things you could do, but there's this feeling of expanse.
Well, and everything, kind of everything's possible. So if you're going around and you see this other friend, or you're going around and you see a mud puddle, or you go around and you see that there's frogs in this pond, that you can just pivot to doing something about that, right? As opposed to our programmed, I have this meeting and I have this meeting, you know, and so that whole ability to kind of follow your nose and pivot, I think that's a big part of play. I know myself, Now, when I look at my schedule, if I have one thing in the middle of the afternoon, it kind of ruins my day compared to if it's totally open. That means anything's possible, right? But it's kind of like the constraints of our schedules, the constraints of being busy, which seems to be valued in our society, is the opposite of I got a free day. So I try to jam everything into a few days and then have at least an afternoon where I have nothing to do. And that's when a lot of times that's when the big ideas happen. That's when a lot of the interest in life comes from, in that like unsupervised adult play. Now, I guess I would call it.
There are lots of people of very different ages and stages in their lives trying to figure out what they're going to do with their lives, or
Yes.
the rest of their lives.
Yes.
However long or short that might be. And what advice would you have for them?
You have to break with the normal way that's done, which is you're pleasing somebody else, like you're pleasing your parents, or you're pleasing society thinks that being a lawyer is valuable. Society thinks of stuff, and so many people take a job, in my opinion, that looks good but feels bad, right? So you have to find the thing that feels good to you, and the problem is that you don't know what that is. It could be an anthropologist, it could be a professional bowler, I don't know what it is. So, but if you don't experiment, if you just kind of, some large percentage of Stanford students come in, used to be they were human bio majors, and now they're CS majors, right? Where'd they get that? They can't all want to be that major, right? And so you kind of start from a closed-minded place, the Carol Dweck stuff, not a growth mindset place. And so my advice to people is, it's hard, but you experiment. Wear the shoes of different professions. Wear the shoes of somebody who cares about money, or wear the shoes of somebody who doesn't care about money. Wear the shoes of. It's not just
Where somebody who doesn't have any shoes.
Yeah. It's not just try to decide whether you're a fireman or a banker. Try to understand by experimenting what's exciting to you. Don't think of it as somehow I have to pull it out of myself what it is that I'm going to be, that you somehow are going to, with your big brain, solve the problem of what am I going to be when I grow up. I don't think that's possible or easily. So think of it as an experiment. I'm going to do a bunch of little projects. I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to try to see how it fits. And so I think it's a kind of an experimental mindset that finds the answer, not like thinking about it harder. With younger kids, I wish they wouldn't think about it at all. In fact, with Stanford kids, I wish they wouldn't think about it at all. Like this whole notion that you have to figure this out now, it's just too soon. Give yourself a break. But if you get into an experimental mindset about it, then you're always looking, you're always noticing, oh, that person's a opera singer. I wonder if I should be an opera singer. It's a kind of this kind of open mind looking at things that will find the right thing. So I'd rather let it, for young kids, I'd rather let it hit them by just trying a bunch of things and then see what they resonate with, rather than working at what are you going to be when you grow up.
David, thank you so much
Sure.
for this conversation.
Nice to talk to you.